Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Sometimes the loudest warning sign is not the insult. It is the person beside you deciding the insult is useful. In this story, the lesson is simple and expensive. When your spouse performs disrespectfully to win points with a room full of shallow people, do not argue for your dignity like it is up for committee review. Watch what they protect. That tells you what they love. My name is Marlon Tate, and the night my wife told me, "If you do not like my friend's rude jokes, pay and leave," I learned how quiet humiliation can sound in a crowded room. It was not loud at first. No plates shattered. Nobody gasped dramatically. There was just a little pause in the private dining room at a seafood place near Baltimore's Inner Harbor. The kind of pause that makes the ice in a glass suddenly sound too sharp. Her friends looked at me over candlelight and polished forks. My wife, Celeste, lifted one shoulder like she was brushing lint off a sweater. Then she smiled. I had known that smile for 7 years. It was a smile she used with donors, hotel managers, and people she wanted something from. Small, polished, almost kind if you did not know her well. I knew it well. I also knew the difference between Celeste being nervous and Celeste being mean on purpose. That night, she was not nervous. She had on a cream silk blouse, gold hoops my sister bought her for Christmas, and that look she wore when she wanted room to understand she belonged at the center of it. I was not her husband then. I was a prop of the wallet. Before we get deeper into this, I want to ask you something. If your partner ever let other people disrespect you in public, would you stay quiet or walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy powerful relationship stories with real consequences, like this video, share it with someone who would have a lot to say about this one. And subscribe for more stories like this. We were there for a friend Nia's contract celebration. Some branding deal for a luxury skincare line. I had worked 10 hours that day at the Penline Maintenance Yard in Philadelphia, then driven 90 minutes south, because Celeste said it mattered that I show face. I still smelled faintly like machine oil under the cedar soap I kept in my locker. Across from me, Nia's husband had skipped the dinner and sent flowers. I should have done that. I made a different choice because I was still trying to save a marriage that had been surviving on appearances longer than I wanted to admit. The jokes had started small. My tie was so sincere. My watch was giving responsible uncle. Somebody asked if I still packed my lunch in one of those blue-collar little coolers. Then they moved my work. I am a transit electrician and maintenance supervisor, and I love what I do. I keep trains moving. I can listen to a motor and tell you what part is tired. I can bring light back to a dead platform in winter before commuters ever see the problem. But at that table, they said maintenance, the way some people say, failed. Celeste laughed at first with a hand over her mouth, like she could not help it. That hurt more than open cruelty. A stranger can disrespect you and still leave your soul mostly intact. Your wife joining in is different. That crawls under your ribs. Nia said, "Celeste, be honest. You marry the only man you know who irons his undershirts." Another friend, Patrice, asked me whether I set alarms for intimacy the way I probably set maintenance schedules. Everybody laughed. Even the waiter gave that nervous half-smile service people use when rich folks are being ugly and they need tips. I gave Celeste 2 chances to stop it. The first time, I touched her wrist lightly under the table. That was our old signal from church functions and long family cookouts, our quiet way of saying enough. She pulled her arm back without looking at me. The second time, I said her name out loud, just once. Celeste. Not hard, not pleading either. Just a man asking his wife to remember herself. She took a sip of her smoked old-fashioned, looked me full in the face, and said the sentence that ended us. "If you do not like my friend's rude jokes, pay and leave." I stared at her for one long breath. In that breath, I saw all the things I've been editing for months. The way she corrected how I pronounce wine labels around her clients, but never corrected them when they called my work cute. The way she said, "our money," when a bill was due in my career, when a sacrifice was needed. The The way she treated my steadiness like wallpaper. Something in me stopped reaching. I lifted my hand for the server, asked for the check, and made sure my voice did not shake. Dignity likes plain language. The bill was a little over $1,800. Crab cakes, oysters, cocktails with smoking rosemary, desserts nobody finished, and a bottle of champagne they had ordered before I arrived. I paid for all of it. I tipped well, because I was raised not to make a worker pay for someone else's disrespect. Then I stood, tucked my napkin beside the plate, and looked at Celeste. She must have expected a speech. I did not give her one. I just said, "Now it is paid for, you can keep talking." Then I walked out past the hostess stand and into cold March air off the harbor. In the parking garage, I sat in my truck with the engine off and my hands on the steering wheel. I did not cry. I did not punch anything. I did not call my brother, though I wanted to. I sat there staring at the little pine tree air freshener my niece had hung from the mirror as a joke, because she said my truck always smelled like rain and old coffee. I had a decision to make. I could go home that night and start screaming, or I could let the truth arrive without me dressing up in anger. I chose silence because silence leaves fewer lies to hide behind. The drive back to Philadelphia was one of those late winter drives where the road looks slick even when it is dry. I passed gas stations, dark strip malls, and a 24-hour diner outside Wilmington where truckers lined the counter. I almost stopped there for pie. I did not, because I knew if I sat under bright lights with a tired waitress calling me honey, I might start telling the story too early. I was not ready for witnesses. By the time I crossed the Schuylkill and saw the city lights, I had gone from hurt to something cleaner. Hurt asked why. Clarity asked what now. Celeste and I lived in a narrow brick row house in West Philly, 3 blocks from a church with bronze bells that rang every Saturday at noon. It had been my house before the marriage. My father and I spent 2 summers restoring it room by room. We sanded the stair rails by hand. We found an old penny tile under cheap vinyl in the kitchen and brought it back. In the basement workshop, I kept clamps on a pegboard, jars of screws sorted by size, and a walnut church pew I was refinishing for an old deacon in North Philly. The order calmed me. That night, the sorter was waiting. Celeste got home around 1:15. I heard the front door, her heels clicking once, then dropping onto the rug. She came upstairs smelling like perfume, cold air, and anger. "So that is what we are doing?" she said from the bedroom doorway. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in an old Temple University sweatshirt, folding T-shirts into a duffel bag. "Not everything. Just my part," I said. She laughed like I was being dramatic. "You embarrass me." I zipped the bag slowly, because if I moved too fast, I knew my temper would outrun my mouth. "No," I said. "You rented me out." She hated that line because it was true. Her face changed. "Not soft, not sorry. Hard. You are so determined to be the victim," she said. "They were joking. You always make everything heavy." That used to work on me. I used to second-guess my own reactions whenever she called them heavy. Maybe I was too serious. Maybe my feelings arrived in work boots and took up too much floor space. But not that night. A joke is something both people can survive. I told her. You sat there and used me to buy a room. I grabbed my overnight bag and my work boots. I did not sleep at home. I drove to my mother's place in Mount Airy and parked 2 houses down because I did not want to wake her with my headlights, sweeping the front windows. My mother is the kind of woman who irons pillowcases and keeps a bowl of lemons on the table because she likes how clean they look. She heard me anyway. Mothers hear trouble through walls. She opened the door in her robe before I knocked twice, looked at my face, and stepped aside. No questions first. That mercy nearly undid me. There are kindnesses that make a grown man feel his knees. I slept 3 hours on her couch under an Afghan my aunt crocheted in the 90s. In the morning, my mother made grits, turkey sausage, and coffee so strong it felt medicinal. She let me eat in silence until I spoke. When I told her what happened, she did not gasp or curse Celeste. She buttered toast and said, "Humiliation is never an accident when it comes with an audience." Then she asked the right question. Has she been cruel for a while, or did she just get caught being cruel? That question settled in me like a stone. It was not about the dinner anymore. It was about the pattern. The pattern that started quietly, the way mold starts behind a wall. Celeste and I met at a Juneteenth block party in Germantown 6 years earlier. She was holding a paper plate with baked beans and telling a story to 3 women at once, switching her voice and expression for each one. I remember thinking she had the kind of energy people lean toward without knowing why. I was 40 then, recently promoted, steady in every way. She was 34, running a boutique event planning company called Cedar and Gold, turning church halls and hotel ballrooms into elegant little dreams for people with money to spend. She was good at it too. I do not want to make her small, just because she later made me feel small. Celeste could walk into a dull room and see color where other people saw walls. She could pair table linens, flowers, and lighting so a simple anniversary dinner looked like a magazine spread. She kept swatches of fabric and labeled envelopes and wrote notes on the back of receipts in green ink. On our 3rd date, she took me to a soul food place in South Philly and said my habit of folding my napkin onto my lap before the server arrived was ridiculously endearing. In the beginning, her ambition felt beautiful next to my steadiness. I had systems. She had spark. I packed my lunch in stainless steel containers. She forgot breakfast and lived on coffee until noon. I kept a paper calendar on the fridge because I like seeing the month as a whole. She put everything in her phone and still ran 5 minutes late everywhere. I liked how she sang fragments of old Anita Baker songs while looking for her keys. She liked how I hummed without realizing it when I fixed things around the house. We were not similar, but for a while we were kind. The first year of marriage, kindness carried us. We spent Sundays visiting my mother, then her aunt in Cherry Hill. We painted the back bedroom sage green. We argued about where to put the bookshelf and ended up laughing on the floor, eating takeout from a Jamaican spot on Baltimore Avenue. When business was good, Celeste bought peonies and put them in mason jars all over the house. When business was slow, I covered more. That did not bother me. Marriage is not a scorecard when both people are honest. The problem came when Celeste began treating rescue like infrastructure, something as permanent as the stairs. Her company grew fast after a local athlete's wife hired her for a baby shower that ended up in a regional magazine. New clients wanted rooftop engagement parties, luxury brunches, branded women's conferences. Celeste started saying yes to jobs that required fronting money she did not yet have. She needed deposits for chairs, florals, custom menus, and photographers. More than once, she came to me with that careful voice she used when she wanted a favor to sound temporary, just until the client pays, just for 2 weeks, just so I do not lose momentum. I believed in her. I kept saying yes. My first decision that could have gone differently happened 2 years before that restaurant dinner. My cousin Byron, who does taxes and notices trouble the way mechanics notice engine noise, told me not to put my name on Celeste's business line of credit. Help if you want, he said, but do not tie your house to her hustle unless she starts acting like your house matters. I laughed it off then because I thought love made caution look cold. I signed anyway. I told myself marriage meant faith. Looking back, that was not faith. That was me confusing support with silence around risk. Once the credit line existed, emergencies multiplied. A client paid late. A florist changed prices. A hotel demanded more upfront because someone in Celeste's circle had burned them before. Then came the image expenses. A nicer laptop. Professional headshots. A wardrobe for tastemaker dinners. A retainer for a publicist who called herself a visibility architect. Celeste started saying things like, perception shapes opportunity, which sounded wise until you realized perception was always being paid for by somebody else. Usually me. When I asked to review numbers, she said I was bringing utility energy into a space that needed vision. I let that insult dress itself up as creativity. There were other moments. A summer wedding on the main line where she introduced me to donors as my husband, the trained genius, then laughed when one man said, so he keeps the city from falling apart while you make it pretty. A Christmas party where she told me not to wear my good brown boots because they were too neighborhood for the venue. The time her friends came over for wine, and one of them asked whether I still fix things myself for fun now that we could afford not to. Celeste heard every one of those comments. Each time she let them slide by like the weather. I kept rationalizing because I was embarrassed by how much I had invested. Pride can trap you as effectively as love. I told myself she was stressed, building, hustling. I told myself successful marriages go through seasons. I told myself every couple has one person who feels more publicly polished than the other. That last lie was especially dangerous because it sounded mature. But dignity cannot live forever in a house where one person is constantly being translated into something easier for strangers to consume. Celeste started editing me in public, shortening my stories, finishing my sentences, rebranding my quiet as limitation instead of peace. There was a Sunday in October when the whole thing almost broke open. My family has a first Sunday dinner every month. Nothing fancy. Smothered chicken, collards, macaroni, cornbread, dominoes after dessert. My niece makes place cards because she likes pretending the dining room is a banquet hall. Celeste came late, looked at the table, and whispered, "You all really eat this heavy every month?" My mother heard her. Everybody heard her. The room went still for half a second. Then my mother smiled and said, "Only when we are happy." On the drive home, I told Celeste that remark was disrespectful. She called me oversensitive. That night, I should have insisted on counseling immediately. That was my second decision. That could have gone differently. I knew then we were no longer disagreeing about taste or manners. We were disagreeing about basic respect. But I chose peace over confrontation because I had a 12-hour shift the next day and because I still believed good weekends could cancel bad moments. I told myself I would bring up counseling after her next big event, then after the holidays, then after tax season. Delay is how people slowly volunteer for more pain. I understand that now in a way I wish I did not. After the restaurant, the delay was over. By Monday morning, I called Byron and an attorney named Rochelle Green, a calm woman in Center City who wore neat braids and spoke like every sentence had passed inspection before leaving her mouth. Celeste and I had a post-nuptial agreement drafted 3 years earlier after her business first hit turbulence. We never expected to use it in anger. Rochelle did not traffic in anger anyway. She trafficked in options. She told me what I could do, what I should not do, and how not let humiliation push me into sloppy choices. Revenge feels best when it survives paperwork. I did not drain accounts or throw her clothes on the lawn like some neighborhood spectacle. I did something far more unsettling. I became exact. I opened a separate checking account for my paycheck. I alerted the bank that no new business debt tied to my house could be added without my direct written approval. I withdrew my guarantee from a planned vendor contract for Celeste's spring luxury bridal showcase. I canceled the additional insurance rider I had been carrying for equipment she stored in my basement workshop. Then I documented every household expense for the previous 18 months. Facts are colder than fury. That is why they last. Celeste did not take the first week seriously. She thought I was staging a prolonged mood. She texted me things like, "Are you still being weird?" And "We need to move on like adults." That phrase made me laugh the first time I read it in the break room, beside the vending machine. Adults, apparently, were supposed to swallow disrespect if it arrived dressed in glamour. I stayed with my mother for 5 nights, then moved into a furnished short-term apartment in University City near Clark Park. It had thin walls, a squeaky radiator, and a view of bare trees. It also had peace. Peace made the decision easier to keep. 2 weeks later, Celeste showed up at my job just before my shift ended. The maintenance yard was loud with metal clanks, diesel breath, and men hollering over a wheel assembly. She arrived in camel heels that made no sense for gravel and grease, carrying a white bakery box from that expensive place near Rittenhouse she loved. The younger techs tried not to stare. I took her to the side office with the dented filing cabinet and the space heater that only warmed your left ankle. She set the pastries down like peace offerings. "You are humiliating me now," she said. Interesting choice of first sentence. I remember looking at her then and realizing she still thought the center of the story was her embarrassment, not my injury. I asked whether she had come to apologize or negotiate optics. She blinked, offended. I said, "I was sorry if your feelings were hurt," she said. But you are blowing up our whole life over one bad dinner. I had prepared for tears, anger, maybe even honesty. What I had not prepared for was how tired I would feel hearing the same minimization in a different outfit. It was not one dinner, I said. It was the first time you said the quiet part where everybody could hear. She sat very straight in that ugly metal chair and crossed her legs carefully to avoid the floor. My friends can be extra, she said. You know that. I thought about the word extra, how people use it when they want to airbrush cruelty into personality. And you can be cruel, I said. That landed. Her face softened just enough for me to see the woman I married flicker through. Marlon, I'm under pressure all the time, she said. Those women are my clients, my referrals, my visibility. I cannot always correct the room. I answered the truth she had been circling. Then the room owns you. She cried then, but not enough to move me. I am not a stone. I hated seeing her cry. I also knew tears could mean grief without meaning change. She said she had been stressed, that business was not as good as it looked online, that Nia and Patrice had become people she performed for, because losing their approval felt like losing oxygen. I believed parts of that. Performance was her drug. Validation was her weather. But understanding somebody's wound does not require volunteering to be cut by it. I told her I would pay the mortgage through the end of the month, and after that we needed a formal separation plan. That is when consequences began arriving on schedule. Celeste's spring bridal showcase had been built on assumptions. My credit backing the linen supplier, my truck moving rental inventory when her drivers canceled, my workshop storing arches and signage, my weekend belonging to her if a setup ran late. Once I withdrew those supports, she had to replace not just money but reliability. Reliability is expensive when you never respected it while you had it for free. The linen supplier reduced terms. A florist demanded payment up front. 2 freelance assistants quit after Celeste delayed their checks. Nothing dramatic happened overnight. Things simply stopped being held up by my invisible labor. The first event she lost was a 50-person engagement dinner at a boutique hotel in Chestnut Hill. The client called me by mistake because my number was still listed as backup on an old invoice. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered and gave them to Rochelle's office for any legal questions about the separation of responsibilities. Later, Celeste called, furious that I had not covered for her when the delivery timing fell apart. I thought about lying to ease the blow. I chose something else. I covered for you for years, I said. That is how you ended up thinking disrespect was affordable. She hung up on me. My own life grew quieter in useful ways. I went back to early mornings, steel-toe boots, coffee in a black thermos, and train schedules that made sense because tracks do not flatter themselves. I finished a church pew in my mother's garage on weekends because I had moved my tools there temporarily. The smell of lemon oil and sawdust steadied me. Deacon Willis came by in his Phillies cap and ran his hand across the restored, would like it was a memory he could touch. You have patient hands, he said. I almost laughed. Patient hands had built a lot of things my marriage never deserved. Celeste, on the other hand, was discovering what happens when image meets arithmetic. She had a beautiful website, strong photographs, and an Instagram full of candlelit tablescapes. What she did not have anymore was the man who balanced vendor deadlines, fixed broken display stands, loaded vans in the rain, and covered cash gaps without asking for public praise. People think money is the most important support in a relationship. It is not. Competence is. Calm is. A person who keeps showing up while you are busy being admired is worth more than a room full of applause. Celeste learned that lesson by losing the infrastructure she mocked. News traveled the way it always does in black communities that stretch across churches, salons, family reunions, and service jobs. Nobody announced our separation formally, but people pieced it together. My barber, Mr. Leon, turned my chair toward the mirror one Saturday and said, I am not asking business. I am only saying peace looks better on you than confusion. At my mother's church, one usher squeezed my shoulder and passed me a second dinner roll like carbohydrates were pastoral care. Even small kindnesses felt different because I was no longer spending so much energy defending a woman who kept volunteering me for disrespect. In May, Celeste sent me a long email instead of texting. That alone told me she had reached a different kind of desperation. She wrote that a hotel group had paused potential contract after hearing she was difficult with logistics. She wrote that she was behind on vendor payments. She wrote that she had started therapy and now understood she confused admiration with intimacy. The most honest line in the email was buried near the end. I thought your steadiness would always be there no matter how I treated it. I read that sentence 5 times. It was the first time she had described the actual theft. Rochelle advised me to respond only about legal matters. She was right. Still, I sat with that email all evening in my little apartment while the radiator knocked and kids played basketball in the courtyard below. I had another decision to make. I could step back in one more time, loan money, rescue a contract, prove I was the bigger person in some theatrical way. A part of me wanted that because being needed can feel like love when you're lonely enough. Instead, I replied with 3 sentences. I'm glad you are in therapy. Please direct financial matters to Rochelle. I wish you healing, not access. Summer came hard and sticky. SEPTA station smelled like hot concrete and brake dust. I took on extra shifts and saved without trying. On Fridays, I drove to Camden to help my uncle repaint the fellowship hall at his church because he paid in fish sandwiches and old stories. One evening, after we finished, he told me marriage can survive money trouble, grief, even boredom, but it cannot survive contempt wearing perfume. I had never told him specifics, so I just looked at him. He shrugged and dipped his sandwich in hot sauce. A man does not lose himself in one day, he said. He loses himself in edits. The divorce process moved slower than my anger had. That was good for me. By the time mediation started, I no longer wanted revenge the way people imagine revenge. With humiliation returned in equal measure, I wanted accuracy. The mediator met us in an office near City Hall with watery coffee and fake plants. Celeste looked thinner, not glamorous, tired thin. She wore a navy dress and no wedding ring. She asked to keep cedar and gold entirely, along with its debt. I agreed. I kept the house. We split furnishings with an almost embarrassing politeness, as if manners might cover history. Sometimes endings are civil, because love is already burned out. During a break in mediation, Celeste asked whether we could walk outside. It was late September, bright and windy, with leaves skittering along the sidewalk near Dilworth Park. We stood by the fountain while office workers hurried past carrying salads and phones. She said therapy had forced her to hear herself without audience noise. She said Nia stopped calling when the free dinner stopped. Patrice borrowed money and never repaid it. I was trying to be the woman that room respected, she said, and I ended up being cruel to the only person who really knew me. I believe she meant it. Some truths arrive late, but still arrive honestly. I did not take her back. That mattered more than any sharp line I could have delivered. Growth is not proved by speeches. It is proved by what you refuse to reopen. I told her I hoped she became kinder than the version of herself I lived with near the end. I also told her I was done being the place she returned to after performing damage elsewhere. That made her cry again, quietly this time, with no mascara to dramatize it. We stood in the city wind while a food truck generator rattled nearby and a bus sighed at the curb. It felt ordinary. That was the dignity of it. The divorce was finalized in November. The same week, I moved back into the row house. It felt strange at first. Too much space. Too much memory tucked into corners. I repainted the bedroom a muted clay color because Celeste once said darker tones made rooms look expensive, and I realized I wanted this room to look restful instead. I carried her last storage bins to the front hallway for pickup and found a bag of green ink pens in a drawer. I almost smiled. Then I put them in the donation box. Healing is often less dramatic than people think. Sometimes it is choosing what gets drawer space now. Around Christmas, I heard from a mutual friend that Celeste had shut down Cedar and Gold and taken a full-time operations job with Convention Center in Baltimore. At first, that sounded like failure if you looked at it through her old lens. Through mine, it sounded like reality finally offering her structure, a salary, deadlines, Accountability that did not depend on flattering clients at dinner. She sent one final letter in January. Handwritten, no performance. She apologized specifically for the restaurant, for laughing when Nia joked about my lunch cooler, for telling me my mother's dinner table was heavy, for treating my calm like something less than sophisticated. I wrote back once. I thanked her for the specificity because vague apologies are just another way to ask for mercy without changing shape. I told her I had donated the silver bar tools we got as wedding gifts to a neighborhood fundraiser and given the peony vase set to my sister. I told her the church pew now sat in Deacon Willis's foyer, gleaming under afternoon light. Most of all, I told her this. The worst thing she did was not embarrass me in public. It taught herself to believe that dependable love was too plain to protect. I mailed the letter and slept well that night. People love stories where revenge looks cinematic. Mine did not. Mine looked like separate accounts, a signed withdrawal of guarantee, a mediator's notepad, and a man learning to eat dinner without waiting for someone else to get home. It looked like me keeping my boots by the back door and no longer apologizing for the life that fit them. It looked like taking the Market Frankfurt line downtown on a Saturday just because I could, getting off near Reading Terminal, buying sweet potato pie, and walking through the city as a whole person again. Revenge at its cleanest is refusing to sponsor the lie that hurt you. Last month, I ran into Nia completely by accident at a coffee shop in Fishtown while picking up beans for my mother. She recognized me, shifted, then tried a brittle little smile. "How have you been?" she asked, stirring a drink she did not seem to want. I said peaceful. That single word did more work than any grudge could. She nodded too quickly and looked away. No scene, no lecture. I walked out carrying coffee and the kind of calm that cannot be borrowed. There are people who only understand your value when access ends. By then, the lesson is no longer for them. I still think about that night at the harbor sometimes. Not because I miss Celeste. I miss pieces of her, maybe the songs half sung while hunting for keys, the peonies, the green ink. But I do not miss being translated into something cheaper for her convenience. There's a bell at the church down my block. That rings every Saturday at noon. When I hear it now, I stop what I am doing for a second, not to pray exactly, more to remember. The room that laughs while you're being diminished is not your room. The person who protects that room is not your home. What stayed with me most was not the bill at the harbor restaurant. It was a pattern behind it. The family dinner she mocked, the business crises my silence kept solving, the way accuracy changed everything once I stopped arguing and started documenting. Boundaries are not revenge by themselves, but they make shallow people finally meet consequence. And consequence, unlike humiliation, does not need an audience. If this story hit you hard, that is because disrespect rarely starts big. It grows when good people keep excusing it. So tell me below, did Marlon get justice, or did Celeste lose him long before that dinner ever happened? Like this video. Share it with someone who believes boundaries matter. And subscribe for more original relationship and revenge stories like this. The end.